All right, hi everyone. Welcome back to Kurt Studio 2309-2023, log number 3. So Unity, that's been a whole interesting situation. The Unity engine had the chaotic publicity event, should we say, of trying to install a kind of per install revenue system. This took the game development community by storm in a bad way. A lot of people felt kind of betrayed by Unity, and especially because it was retroactive. That was like one of the main problems. And a system which seemed to be, on the surface, easy to exploit. I do find it quite funny that Unity thought that they might have been able to deal with malicious install events, even though the nature of game developers is inherently hackers. It summons hackery personalities. There is absolutely no way that people wouldn't be able to get around the per install system to exploit and to effectively drain developers of money that they didn't like. But it seems they've rolled back on some of it now, but I do feel like the damage has been done. This has been probably the best publicity event for Godot and Unreal that could have ever happened. Like, Godot has got so much extra funding now, and even I've been playing with it. I've done some cool experiments with it, and I'm actually really impressed with the graphical fidelity of Godot 4 compared to previous versions. Like, the anti-aliasing, pretty good. Volumetric fog, pretty good as well. Screen space effects, pretty good. I still don't really like the Godot interface, and I don't necessarily like the node system in Godot, but because it's kind of harder to manage many properties in the way that I could with Unity components. But this is all just to say that it's been interesting watching what's happened in the game development community, and I'm quite happy that Godot is getting some extra attention now. Again, I did try and raise a bit of a red flag for Unity on the main channel when I did a video asking if Unity is going in the right direction. This was back when they did layoffs for a content development team who were making like sample projects for Unity. There was a really interesting one called Gaia, I think, and they just cancelled it, and they wouldn't even release the files to people. And I found that really weird and annoying. That was like a major red flag for me, because what a creative software company wants to be doing, if they want to develop a software well, is they want to develop the tools and test them to make sure that they actually work properly in a workflow. That looks like what they were effectively doing with the content development team, which they then fired. That would be like Blender firing the Blender studio. Okay, next thing. So recently, you may know that I've started a casual sponsorship system on my main channel. This is to start sponsorships again, but in a way that's relevant to viewers. Okay, so there are a bunch of things about how YouTubers and companies do sponsorships regularly, which I don't like because I feel like it's kind of manipulative and controlling, especially with how contracts are managed. Never liked that. And I also didn't like the way the content was forced onto viewers. So I've always believed there is a way to do it that's more comfortable, where like individuals, like artists, other creators, small businesses in the community can sponsor videos so that the content is more relevant to the other viewers. So when you're watching a video, you'll feel like, oh, people like you have sponsored it, rather than massive megacorps that don't really care about how you feel about a video. They just want to jam a message in there to try and take your money. So again, I'm in a bit of a lucky position in the way that I didn't need to do sponsorships necessarily, and I didn't really want to do them out of principle for those companies, but now I have a system where it's kind of more viable. So if you're interested in doing a sponsorship for my channel, again, if you're an individual, you're going to get a really cheap rate. That's the whole thing. Like, we have this adjusting pricing where if a company wants to sponsor one of my videos, they have to do it on my terms. They don't get to tell me how to structure it in the video. I will do it how I want, and they are going to pay maximum price. But if you're an artist that wants to get your portfolio out there, or just like a small business in the community, you'll get a massive cost reduction. Now the rate will change, but I say to people that the individual rate is 75% lower than the corporate rate, but it's all subject to change. And for the people that have signed up for their first time as individuals, I've given them like a special deal as well to make it really cheap for them. I also found it really interesting that, like, well, first of all, the first video that used one of these casual sponsors did really well. No one complained about it in the video. People were thanking the person for sponsoring, Spencer Magnuson in this case. And when I checked the watch retention graph for the sponsored messaging at the end of the video, there was no drop. Okay, there was the usual slight decline that happens throughout the video, but there was no sudden drop when the sponsor segment happened. And I found that really interesting. It just continued. And I was like, that doesn't happen for sponsors regularly. So people seem to actually be responding to it because it was relevant to them. So I'm really interested in how that's been working. I'm glad that people have responded to it. Coinciding with this, there were affiliate changes. We'll speak about that another time. But also, I made a note that if I did any collaboration videos with other creators, whether it's you, it might be, you never know, one day. I've been trying to enable new types of videos to happen to get more people involved, or another YouTuber. If there is a sponsorship on that video, half of the money will go to them. Or if there's 3 people, we'll split it 3 ways. So just like this kind of equality principle where money gets shared with whoever participates in the recording of a video. Okay, so that's noted. Okay, so what about house and studio progress? Because it's been quite a long time since I did a video on the main channel talking about designing my new studio in Blender. Well, house progress is actually going really well. The builders we've got are amazing. Again, this is a family home, not just my home. I don't have the money to buy land and build a house. So I am still living with my parents. It's a bit of a complicated thing, but more and more people are living with their parents for a longer amount of time, given the economic situation and the housing market. But effectively, the studio is my section of the house. I have a hand in designing it, I have a hand in setting it up, and I can, even when I moved out, I can still use it for a workplace. But eventually, if I don't need it anymore, it can be used for my parents, and even, you know, for reselling the house in the future. It's going to be a really, really cool space. So the studio, I wish I could show you some progress on it, but there hasn't really been much for that room specifically because the order that they're doing the house in is effectively starting top down. So there's a back section to the house which involves a game room / office space and then moving on to a pool house, which is being built entirely new. So they're starting with that section. It's a lot of groundwork to dig things up, putting like all the concrete supports and stuff, redoing floors and like ceiling areas for that part of the house. But also when it comes down to the lower floor, there has been work done internally to make like the new doorways for rooms. But for the actual studio, it hasn't really been touched because the entire front of the house is going to have to be pulled out. So they're going to need to knock down every wall there and pull it out. So that's going to be like a complicated section to do. So I wish I could show you progress on that. I've been having this weird thought in my mind. Maybe this is like a self-sabotage thing that people think it's a lie. Like the studio thing was just an idealistic thing that I was lying about. But it's not. It's right there. We just have to wait so long for progress to happen. But it is really cool and I will show you more of it when I can. Oh, but recently we had a meeting with the electrician that came in to kind of talk about like where to have electricity ports around the house and what to do for lighting. And I spoke to them about the idealistic lighting, which I love the kind of stuff you see in like Apple conferences or like Apple showcases, where occasionally they go to these studio rooms which have diffused box lights, like LED lights on the ceiling, because it gives you this really cool grid coverage and it creates this nice soft white base of lighting around the entire room, which is really great for adding extra lighting sources, but it means that everything is well lit and it feels like a laboratory or a showroom of some kind. And that's something I want to go for. I want a nice bright space with diffused lighting that feels like a lab when you walk into it. It can be used for all different types of projects. So again, yeah, it's taking a while, but it's coming. And maybe for the last section in this log, what is happening with Project Provenance, my collection of historical artifacts? Well, again, as I mentioned in previous logs, income has halved for this year roughly so far. I like to invest my money into some small philanthropy-based things, which is also why, even though I'm not rich, like I don't have a massive income, but when I do my physical projects, for not all of them, but for a certain number of them, a percentage goes to charity as well. I'm trying to learn about the gift aid system here in the UK because we have this system where it might be an international thing as well, I'm not too sure. But in the UK, if you give money through a system called gift aid, then the government also has to give money. I think it's like a 20% thing or 20, 25, I'm not too sure. So I've been learning a bit about that as well. But Project Provenance, where I have my collection of historical artifacts and other related things, that was just a way of me, when I had even just a little bit of surplus, I would take some of that and feed it into something which I thought was a nice humanitarian project of some kind. So for me, that was taking artifacts off the private art market, the private auction market, and then just protecting them so they don't get misappropriated, because there's an element of that, and so that they don't get stored in vaults and stuff as well, because there's another element of that, so that they might eventually be redonated back to museums or sent back to origin. But that's actually really complicated to track because for a lot of little artifacts, they don't have good like provenance trails. Like the records haven't really been kept well. But basically, I've got it and I've had to pause it for now just because the money surplus is not available. So consider that hibernating. But they will be preserved, but they'll probably make another appearance in the studio when that's ready. Okay, what else? Personal updates. My granddad had a bit of a minor heart attack, ended up having, well, he went in for a triple bypass, went in for a quadruple one in the end. So he's recovering, but he's doing okay now. Although I've just had some bad news about my nan on the other side of the family has a growth in her brain. So we're going to have to see how that goes. But regardless of what happens in my personal life, I just like to try and keep moving. So yeah, if you made it to the end of this log, put a coin emoji in the comments so I can see if you made it this far. Let's keep building for the future. Have a fantastic day, everyone. Let me know what you've been doing as well. You're always welcome. Tell me what's going on in your life. I read every single comment. Have a great day, and I will see you next time.